Good afternoon, everyone. We're very fortunate today to have a great speaker for Dean's Rounds, Dr. Linda Miles, who did her PhD in counseling psychology right here a few years ago, and has been well known in the field, has spoken for and written for Wall Street Journal, other places, has a wonderful book on how to change your brain and in a positive manner. And I'm not going to steal any more thunder from her. We'll just mention a personal prior to HIPAA story. I used to take care of Dr. Miles' mom many, many years ago. And so we're very pleased to have her on our campus, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dr. Rondelay is definitely a healthcare hero. He took such good care of my mom. My mom was a nurse for 50 years. So she knew a lot and loved Dr. Rondelay. So he's going to be greatly missed. I want to thank all of you for going into medicine and for being healthcare heroes. After 40 years as a psychologist, I'm so glad I chose this profession. It's hard work. I've worked at a psychiatric hospital. I've worked at the mental health center. I've been in private practice. And even though it's hard, I wouldn't trade the rewards that you get for that kind of giving. And even though I see people, friends that went to work for corporations that are making, millions of dollars, I wouldn't trade. So good for you, and thank you for what you're doing. And I was thinking about the heroism of physicians, and I was getting my talk ready yesterday, and the headline was about a midwife in Afghanistan. Did any of you happen to see that? She was delivering it. Did you see it? She was delivering a baby, and she refused to leave the woman because the baby was crowning, and she wouldn't leave. And they shot her after she delivered the baby. So a lot of heroism goes on in medicine, as you know. So thank you. So I gave you all presents. And in your presents, there's a book, and I'm going to explain the title, why it says Change Your Story, Change Your Brain, because you literally change your brain when you do meditation, mindfulness, yoga, not figuratively, but literally. And I'm going to show you a video of Susan Lazar from Harvard. Is anyone familiar with her work? Okay, Susan Lazar does MRIs before and after 6 weeks of meditation practice. You will hear her talking about the amygdala shrinking. And you know the amygdala is our fear center, where you're going to be less likely to go into fight, freeze, or flee. Okay, less likely. There's also going to be greater volume up here in the frontal cortex, where you're going to be more compassionate and more able to stay centered. Okay, but here's the rub. Mindfulness is something you have to practice a lot. I do not recommend that anyone who is in graduate school or medical school think that they're going to spend 30 minutes a day doing some kind of mantra. You're not going to do it. But what you can do, and what I'm going to teach you today, are short things to do all day long. Now, for example, one of the things I do if I have a difficult client who's escalating, okay, I'm doing something called a loving kindness prayer. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, may I be healed. May I be at peace. May I be filled with loving kindness. And I'm sending that to them. May you be healed. May you be at peace. May you be filled with loving kindness. Now, they have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not doing it out loud. I'm doing it to myself. as I'm doing it, what do you think is happening to the client? Any ideas? You get calmer. Why? Because they're connected to me and they're picking up on my calmness. As a matter of fact, you guys will find when I want to make a point, I get it, my voice gets really soft. So if you can't hear me in the back, just raise your hand. Okay, because I learned that at the psychiatric hospital. And at times I felt like it kept me from getting hit. I once had a client pick up a boom box and go like this. And I was so calm that he didn't bring it down. Okay. So bottom line is those kind of practices are going to help you calm yourself and calm your patients so that you can do the best you can do. Another trick I use is I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, B, I'm breathing in, B, I'm breathing out, calm, B, calm. Because I've obviously got someone in front of me who's very upset, and I just need to sit with them because sometimes you just need to sit with them when they're very upset. Okay? So be calm. The other thing I do is I get really in touch with my body. So that right now I'm feeling my hand on my pen. Or you feel your feet on the floor. Do you know about doing that? I see you nodding your head.
Yeah.
You do?
Mhm.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys, what are some of the things you do to calm yourself down when you're with patients who are obviously upset? And my understanding is right now you got a lot of them at the ER who are upset because things are backed up and they can't see their family or whatever. So what are some things that you guys do already to calm yourself down? Empathize with them, connect with them. Yes, that's huge. And again, that's up here. It's up here. You want to strengthen this. What else do you do to stay calm yourself? Yeah.
Take deep breaths.
Take deep breaths. Be calm. Be calm. I really recommend the loving kindness prayer, not because you're going to think of it in a spiritual way, but because it's connection. We do calm down when we get connected. One of the biggest lessons I learned, and I want to share with you guys, I'm going to share with you my two great burnouts. I burned out twice, and we just went up in flames twice. And I'm going to explain to y'all what happened and what I learned. But I also want you to know the biggest thing I learned was the enemy was me. I spent way too much time in ridiculous arguments with people who were immature and had their own issues, and I would tie up with them. Let me give you an example of what I mean. When I worked at the mental health center, I didn't have problems with clients. And you guys may have noticed this. We don't tend to have so many problems with the patients. We have problems with the staff, right? Is that right? Okay, so I was no exception, trust me. And there was a guy on the staff who he and I invariably would get into some kind of stupid, right-wrong argument every single staff. And then I feel horrible the rest of the day. It was such a downer, okay? I wish I'd known then to ask myself, where did I learn this stupid behavior? Where did I learn to not keep a boundary with somebody who is that argumentative? And why do I have to have the last word? Many of these things we learn in childhood. It was because I had this snarky brother and I was snarky And we didn't have enough attention in our family. So he and I would go at each other. And guess what? This guy that I argued with physically resembled my brother. You know how the brain loves the familiar? You know how we see the familiar? Don't just think that people with PTSD are the ones who get triggered. We all get triggered. So learning your triggers with a staff is really important, because that's going to be a bigger deal to you probably than with the patients. With the patients, you know what to do. You have a sense of agency. And let me say a word about that. Agency, feeling like there's something you can do, is so important in stressful situations. Because if you feel that you're a victim and you're just automatically playing out some script, you don't have any agency. In the book, I write about, I'm so interested in people who had agency no matter how horrible their circumstances were. And one of them I talk about is Desmond Tutu. And Desmond Tutu is one of my all-time heroes. And he was a hero of apartheid in South Africa. And in the midst of all the prejudice, all the horror that was going on in South Africa, he was able to keep equanimity and help lead them out of it. And they asked him, they said, how did you do that? How did you stay calm in the midst of all this? And he said, I knew if I could not keep myself centered, I couldn't lead people out of where we were. I was just going to be another casualty. So I collect stories like that. One of the stories in the book is a doctor, and she wrote an essay in JAMA, and she's a pediatrician. And what she said was she was having such a horrible time dealing with the children being sick that she literally started making home visits so she could see them play and be happy and not just screaming because they had to come and see her. So finding ways to feel like you have agency and that you're not just trapped. As soon as our brain feels like we're trapped, you're going to feel like you have to fight, freeze, or flee. Those are our big indicators that we've got too much adrenaline and cortisol. So, which, by the way, have any of you studied what they're doing at Columbia University with the microbiome, the brain-gut connection? I think that's going to be the future, in a lot of ways. They may work the psychology out of a job, because we're finding out that the gut has a lot to do with how we're processing things. So I would suggest that in your spare time, you might want to look at some of the research about the microbiome and stress and how we whack it out. My microbiome is kind of whacked out today because I am on a darn, I want to say antidepressant because that's what I say all the time, but antibiotic. And they make me, what's the word? Edgy, and just an antibiotic. So I know there's a brain-gut connection because I feel it today, right now. Okay. Any questions or comments so far before I show you? I'm going to show you a little clip of Susan Lazar talking about her work at Harvard. And for those people who are on Zoom, we've got some people who are on Zoom. You have a link to go to this. We'll be showing it in this room, but you also have a link to go to it. So any questions or comments before I move on? Do you all understand what I'm saying about that? The problem is you. That is going to be you. And another person I've put you a reference to is named Bessel van der Kolk. Have any of you heard about Vandercloak? Okay, he's an MD, and he started studying PTSD back when we didn't know anything about post-traumatic stress. And what he says is you need to listen to your body. He's got a book called The Body Keeps Score. And we know, like when I would get in those fights in staff meetings, how would I know that it was something deep? Because I was sick all afternoon. Then you know, this is not logical. This is not intellectual. I'm not having some kind of intellectual debate. This is taking me down into a dump. So therefore, just start to listen to your body. And when you feel like your reaction is greater than the infraction, or if you feel like you're kind of out of control with no agency about what's going on, ask yourself, gee, I wonder what I have stored in my brain that I am now replaying. And how come I'm dumping so much adrenaline and cortisol into my body right now? Because you feel it. And just one more caveat about that. When it comes to relationships, I have learned to be very nice. That doesn't mean I don't set boundaries, but I'm very nice with my husband not because of him, but because of me. Because what I know is if I start acting like a bee, I get a whole bunch of adrenaline and cortisol that ruins my day. So I have learned to walk away. And I've been known to leave the room when there's great complaining going on because I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to. And so it's not that I'm altruistic. It's not that, oh, I'm such a wonderful person. I'm not going to take this bait. No, it's that I don't want to do it to myself. So I would say that in your personal relationships and in your relationships with other staff that you work with, try not to drink their poison, which we are very inclined to do, because that's one of the things that brings you out. The stories we're telling ourselves and our thoughts can have a lot to do. What we're focused on can have a lot to do with not only the idea of the structure of our brain, but the reality of the structure of our brain. Do any of you know what brain priming is? Anyone know that? Okay. Brain priming is fun. It's really, really interesting. If we gave the guys in here all a cup of hot chocolate and we showed them pictures of women and we asked them, or of men if they're attracted to men, and we asked them to rate how attractive they are, they'll give certain ratings. Then, if we wait a little while and we give them some iced tea and they hold the iced tea, they'll rate the women lower or the men lower. Just because they're holding something cold or they're holding something warm. Okay? We are constantly having these kind of priming things happen. So you want to prime your own brain by keeping focused on the solution, on where you want to go. It's like what Desmond Tutu said he did, because you're going to get primed anyway. Duke University did a whole bunch of studies where they would ask the students to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number. And then they would let them bid on pizzas. So they would bid on, how much they wanted to pay for a pizza. If you wrote down less than 50, you would say significantly lower than if you wrote more than 50. And all you did was write down your social security number. So be careful of how you are priming your brain. You do not want to prime your brain for failure. You don't want to picture that. You don't want to picture things going wrong unless you figure out what your agency is to make it right. And I know you play baseball. How did that work in baseball?
Something that we were always taught is envisioning yourself succeeding. And so
Yes.
that was something that we did. So we learned that a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, the people who were very pessimistic on how things would turn out ended up kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense, to where, you know, you envision yourself failing and that's what you're going to do, just because you're more focused on how you can go wrong as opposed to doing everything right.
That's it. You're priming your brain in the wrong direction. Now, I did plenty of that. Okay, so let's talk about my two burnouts. My first big burnout had to do with priming my brain negatively. That was part of it. I was in grad school full-time, working full-time at the mental health center, and I had a kid. So already, you know, you can see it's pretty bad. Ironically, I was researching stress. And back then, we didn't have the computer that you do. So I had all these books in my room all around me on stress. I couldn't get out of bed. I was down for the count. I crashed and burned. So what was the big takeaway for me out of that? Because fortunately, I was getting to the end of my coursework and I could take a little break before I had to work on my dissertation. So it was that I need to listen to my body more, and that I need to titrate what I'm doing, because I was so burned out. I was having suicidal ideation. I was depressed. I was a mess. So be sure you build in ways to take care of yourself. And don't do what I did and be researching a paper on stress or some such thing when you cannot even get out of bed. And by the way, I had a wonderful doctor, much like Dr. Wahandale, who could connect. And he didn't say to me, oh, you just stressed out or blow me off. He goes, what are you doing to yourself? What are you doing to yourself? Which was a damn good question to ask me. And he asked me in such a caring way. And being on the receiving end of that he really cared. And even asking that question helped me. Do any of you know the research on aerobic exercise and how it helps with anxiety and depression? Do most of you know that? Tons of research. And this is what I tell clients who are depressed. And oftentimes it's as good as an antidepressant. 30 minutes, 3 times a week. It's not like they have to go become an athlete. They just have to do 30 minutes, 3 times a week. I wasn't exercising. I wasn't watching what I ate. I thought I could be a human doing, and I wasn't a human being. Have any of you read the book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers? Okay, it's a fun book. There's a guy at Stanford, his name's Sapolsky, and he studied apes for a long time before he started studying people. And he kind of looks a little like an ape. That's the reason I say that. He's a real kind of hairy guy, but brilliant. And what Sapolsky says is that we're designed just like mammals are designed to, we graze along until there is a lion. And then you better send all your resources to your extremities to fight, freeze, or flee if you're going to live. And what he says is, in our culture, we can keep so many lions in our head that we don't just let down enough. We don't go into refractory time. We don't recover. So how do you guys recover? What do y'all do? What are some things that you do to calm yourself down and graze? How do you graze? Golf. What else?
Spending time with friends and family.
Yeah, just connecting, and that's huge. That is huge. By the way, on that, there's a long-term study. Or any of y'all familiar with the Valiant study at Harvard? Okay, they started studying guys, I don't know, 80, 85 years ago. It's one of the longest running studies in history. I don't know where they got their money to do it this long. They studied sophomores at Harvard, and they wanted to see how well they did in their life over time. Like, what did they do as men? The only one we know that's not anonymous was John F. Kennedy. He was one of the men. But that's how old these men are now. So they have followed them this whole time. What do you think the number one thing is that makes them healthy and gives them life satisfaction? Anybody want to guess?
Spending time with them.
Family, friends and family, connections, not their work, not their success. All that falls away. Bill Gates said that when he was dying. I don't know if any of y'all read, when he had pancreatic cancer. Oh, Steve Jobs, I'm sorry. What's his face? He said that. He said, everything falls away. He said, everything has fallen away, my success, my money, all of that. But what doesn't fall away is my connections. And he said, I have regrets that I didn't connect more with my children earlier, that I didn't know the importance of that. And I will share with you that I had a similar experience. I almost died. That was my second burnout. My second burnout was when I was 50 and I'd been in private practice and I couldn't say no. It wouldn't form in my mouth. And I saw too many people and I went down like a rocket. I got pneumonia and I wound up in the hospital for 9 days. And I remember barely being conscious and hearing the nurses saying that I was going to get transferred to intensive care because my kidneys were shutting down. And it was so weird because I sat there and I thought, the only thing that matters in my life is how much I've loved. Now, again, everything else fell away and it came down to that. And it wasn't like it was this thought. It was like, I just knew it. Just knew that. Much like Steve Jobs. So anyway, so that was my second big burnout. And I started learning lessons then about self-compassion. It's very difficult. Many of us who can be so compassionate to other people can be mean as a snake to ourselves. What we say to ourselves is hideous. And I have so many clients like that would be so compassionate, you could not believe it. And yet, when they talk to themselves, so there are researchers, and I keep giving y'all research because I'm very focused on evidence-based. I don't want to give you anything that I don't feel like there's evidence. We're not going to do pie in the sky. Kristen Neff at University of Texas and Christopher Germer at Harvard have been researching self-compassion. And they have a question to ask yourself. It's like, what would I say to a friend? And sometimes I say to my husband, what would you say to a patient who told you this? Because sometimes he ain't so compassionate to me. So I'm like, get your doctor voice, and so bottom line is, if you do that, if you're compassionate to yourself and you talk to yourself like that, you're actually more effective. We think it helps us to be mean to ourselves and be driven. The research is you actually are clearer, calmer, and more capable when you don't do that. When you don't talk to yourself like horrible. So So start to notice. Let me just summarize some things. Start to notice the way you speak to yourself. Start to notice if that's just crap you learned from the pains. Start to notice when you are triggered, when your reaction to some, and it was usually going to be a staff member or family member, is over the top. And ask yourself, wait a minute. And you know what? It's kind of a life sentence. We never get 100% there. The other night, I was at my stepson's and daughter-in-law's house, and they have one of those fancy things that show all the pictures, you know, and it just keeps flipping. Well, in about 10 minutes, I didn't see a picture of me and my husband. I went berserk inside, just berserk. I mean, I felt like crying. I got so upset. I went home, and we've been very close to them. And there was pictures of us all over the living room, but never mind, I got triggered. And I went home, and instead of just getting pissed off that they have enough pictures of us in there, I went, what is this really? What is this really? And what it really was is that I had a very happy, intact family until I was 7. And we have all these wonderful pictures, and everybody be dressed up and we'd be celebrating. And at 7, my family kind of fell apart, and they stopped taking pictures, and we don't have any pictures. So once I knew that, I could tell my brain, it's okay. It's okay. That was then. That was then. So finding the root of what's going on with you and listening to that can be very valuable, especially when the reaction and the infraction don't match at all. And I've done a lot of couples therapy, and I cannot tell you how much that goes on. I remember seeing a couple once, and he made some kind of religious joke, and I'm not sure even what he said, but it sounded a bit prejudiced against Jewish people. She was almost ready to get a divorce over that comment. She wouldn't speak to him for a week. And they came in, and we kind of dug down and found out her parents died in a concentration camp in the Second World War. He never knew that. She never told him. Her aunt, she was a baby. Her aunt raised her. And her aunt was like her mother. So when he knew that, when he knew, oh my God, that's the reason you have this huge reaction, he started getting tears, started falling down his face, and he goes, I am so sorry. And so I would say to you many times, if somebody goes on and on, you know how in relationships they'll just keep hanging on. Oh, look at these guys. Yeah, especially women who are horrible, horrible. Try to get to the bottom of it. Think about their history and think about what it's really about. What it's really about. So what it's really about is a great question that will save you some stress. Another great question, and my husband as a psychiatrist taught me this question. And the question is, how old is this person really? Because sometimes the most intelligent, the most put together, the most buttoned up people act 3 years old. Have you noticed that? What you don't want to do is join the club. You don't want to get into it. Because what happens with a toddler if they throw a fit and you try to reason with them?
Nothing.
Hard. They just scream louder, right? Yeah. Yeah, you know about that? Yeah, me too. So what do you need to do? What do you need to do when you're with a toddler? Let's just stick with the toddler. You're with them, they're screaming their head off, they're acting out. What do you need to do?
I just give myself a second. I'm just like, all right, figure it out, dude.
That's what you do. Figure it out, dude. You set a boundary, okay? And yet, we can be with people who are acting 3, and they can be 95 and they're acting 3. So I think that's such a good question to ask yourself. How old is this person really? And that is another lesson I learned as a professional. Have you guys noticed that some of your fellow staff members at times act like they're kids, they're young? Have you noticed? Yes. Yes. Don't join in that. Don't try to be logical, because we want to be logical. And when somebody is in their amygdala and they are into fight, freeze, and flee, there ain't no logic. Okay? So we've talked about brain priming. We talked about how the structure of your brain can change. We've talked about neuroplasticity. We've talked about a sense of agency. If you practice mindfulness, it works, but you have to practice it a lot. So I strongly recommend that you do it all day long. And I want to just take you through a little practice that you can use off and on throughout the day. So we're just going to do that together for a minute. And so just take a deep breath and close your eyes. And I want you to just focus on your breathing. And as you breathe in, see if you can breathe in deeply and think the word be. And as you breathe out, calm. And if other thoughts in your mind, it's okay. You just notice they're there. And you refocus on your breath. Know where to go. Nothing to do. And then, if you would, I want you to imagine you're at the top of some stairs. And when I count, you'll step down. 7 down. 6 down. 5 down. 4 down. 3 down. 2 down. And with 1, you're going to find yourself in an incredibly beautiful, peaceful place. Maybe it's the beach. Maybe it's the mountains. But just go there in your mind. See what you see. Hear what you hear. Smell what you smell. Touch what you touch. Allowing yourself to be calmer. And I'm going to count backwards from 3 to 1. And when I get to 1, you'll open your eyes and feel a little calmer. 3, 2, 1. What did you notice during that?
I thought about random things.
Yeah, that your mind wants to race off somewhere else. Yeah. You have to train it. It's like training a puppy. You have to keep bringing it back to the center. Yeah, because your mind is going to go do off this way, do off that way. What else did you notice?
I was aware of all the tension that I was holding.
Yes, you start being aware of your body. You start realizing that you're holding on to all that tension. So remember my first great burnout. So pay attention to your body. What else? Did you notice anything else?
I'm more release on the exhales.
Yes,
than the inhales.
yes. There is more release on the exhales, and they're longer. Calm. You want the exhale to be longer. Okay. I'm taking, when I did it, I was taking you through your senses. Your senses will get you out of your head. If you can start to focus on your senses, start to focus on your body, bringing yourself into the present moment, which is basically, that's all there is. We're making up, we're constructing the past and the future. So again, it's a practice. It takes time. Often if I'm working with people and they're super anxious, I don't have time to run them through mindfulness because it takes you a good bit. But I get them on an antidepressant sometimes that has anti-anxiety qualities so that I can get them calm enough that they can utilize mindfulness. UCLA, and I think I have it in your handouts, UCLA offers a phone mindfulness course. It's really good. So does Duke Integrative Medicine. Both those places, you can actually do a course on the phone. So they've got all the people from around the US. I mean, it may be past the US, I don't know who all's on the phone, but that's a good thing to do. Okay, I want you to understand how we can spread anxiety without even knowing it, because we're so connected with each other. Okay, that's the reason why you want to get as calm as you can, because you're going to spread it to your patients and to other staff. Now, this is a sad finding. University of Washington, do any of you know who John Gottman is? John Gottman was a physicist, and fortunately for our field, he decided to become a marriage and family therapist. So he's a great researcher, and he's really good with research design. What he found was that they took 4-year-old children and they drew their blood and they looked at the amount of adrenaline and cortisol in their blood. And to a statistically significant degree, they could tell if that child lived in a healthy family or an unhealthy family. They didn't have any other data. They had already, done all the testing, all the observations to know which families were healthy and the ones that weren't. But it's contagious, especially to little kids. We don't think they're taking things in, but they are. So what's y'all's reaction to that study? What do you think about that? That 4-year-olds, you can tell if they're living in a healthy environment or not just by their blood. What do you think?
I think it's sad.
Isn't it? It's so sad. I mean, and then that's going to affect them. We know it's going to predispose them to illness. It's going to affect them forever. But also just remember that you don't want to be a stress carrier. You want to be somebody who's part of the solution. So you have to it starts with you to work on yourself. Okay, let me just take my time. Any questions so far? Any questions or other comments? Okay, I have asked for 2 volunteers to come up, and we're going to try to do something that's kind of fun and interesting and hopefully illuminating. So you want to come up? You know what? We better get a chair. Oh, yeah, bring your chair. Thanks for volunteering to do this. Okay. What the metaphor I use with people is to imagine a 3-lane highway in your brain. This lane is calm and centered. This lane is balancing the amygdala, the fear center, juicing it down and looking ahead at where you want to go with a sense of agency. So it's like you said in baseball, you see yourself, you don't see yourself striking out, you see yourself doing well. Okay, so this one's being really centered. Okay, over here this is the voice that we have from the past. So imagine there's an exit. You're in the center lane. There's an exit in your brain that goes, did I make you past or future? You're past, aren't you? Yeah, yeah. So you're going along like this, and then bam, you're off on an exit. And how do you know? You're going to feel it in your body, but you're going to try to get to know it, okay? Over here, we've got the future exit. You go off into the future, and an example of that is I remember when I was preparing my dissertation, and I went and did some statistical analysis, which wasn't my strength for my committee, and they ate my lunch. They had me for lunch. And I left there thinking, I can never do this. I'm not good enough at math. Forget about it. I'm not going to do this. And I was able to get back in the center lane by going, you know what? I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to go get out my stat books. I'm going to give it my best shot. Okay. So I had to pull myself back from the past. I'll never do it. Okay. So I want to show y'all kind of a demo of how this looks to bring yourself back. Okay. So, and I want to give you a demo of self-compassion and what that looks like versus being mean as a snake to yourself. Okay. All right. So you want to start in on me?
Okay. So do you want to start with the test scenario?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna flunk this test.
Okay. So what do you say to yourself? You're going off on, I'm going to flunk the test. How do you get yourself back to the center lane?
Spent a lot of time studying.
Yes, you get agency. You go do something. And you say to yourself, I'm going to do the best I can. And you talk to yourself like you're a friend. You go do something. You don't sit here and dwell on it. Okay. Okay, let's take one of these.
People are gonna laugh at you.
People are going to laugh at you. So what do? You're worried about getting embarrassed and that people are going to laugh. How do you get yourself back to the center lane? Any ideas? So what? I mean, big whoop in the scheme of things, it's like, okay, they laugh at me. I told somebody that when my husband was in med school, that there was a young man in there who had very thick glasses and couldn't see well. And he was doing an episiotomy and he accidentally sewed his mask to the woman. And he stood up and he almost pulled her off the table. And he never lived that down. You know, so, okay, humor's okay. Humor's okay. And you need it. We all need humor. If you ever want to see two humorous people, watch Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. They are hilarious, the two of them. And both of them have been through hell. And it's good to see people who are like that. Okay. What's another one?
I'll never amount to anything.
Oh, they'll failure one. This is one I hear a lot from people who are hugely successful. I hear stuff like this, okay? And I'm sitting there looking at this person like, what? I once did a group where everybody in there was a professional. I had a physician in there. I had 2 lawyers. I had somebody had a PhD in anthropology. And one day, one of the women in there goes, I don't want to say anything because everyone in here is so smart and I think I'm going to sound stupid. Everyone in there said the same thing. They all said they thought they sounded stupid. So I said, well, why don't we just name this the stupid class? And I said, and if you guys are the stupid class, who is the smart class? You know, that is such a theme to notice in yourself. When you feel that you're inadequate, that will pull you down. Comparisons, that's another thing that helped me burn out, is always comparing with other people instead of saying, how can I be the best I can be? What are some of the other things, mean things that people say to themselves?
My hard work's never going to pay off.
Yes, my hard work will never pay off. It's just all for nothing. Or I hear it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how hard I work. I'm not up to it anyway. Have you guys heard of the Imposter Syndrome? Yes, that's huge. You know, I'm going to get caught pretending. Now, when you first get in the field, we all have that. I mean, we all have that. Get this. When I first knew my husband, I was just out of grad school. He was a psychiatrist. He was older. And we had this long table of our peers on either side. And he would ask us a question about a case. And if you didn't immediately have the answer, it didn't matter because he would sit there he was dictating. He would sit there holding the dictaphone, just looking at you silently. So all your peers are looking at you while you are racing through a chart, trying to find the information. So I was terrified of him. And I felt like such an imposter, like, this is going to sound so stupid. So obviousobviously we got past it because we're married now. But I think some of that is just, the way it is. Do you all get the idea of how you keep bringing yourself back? You're off into the future. You're off into the past. How can you tell? I mean, here's the future, here's the past. How can you tell that you're off? How do you know? How do you know you've gone off the rails?
It seems like when there's a negative connotation to it, probably you're not living in the moment, it's either past or present. It's kind of getting at you.
Yes. And you're going to feel like crap. Why are you feeling like crap? What's going on in your body?
Stress.
Yeah, it's adrenaline and cortisol. And so you're going to feel like this and like you got to do something right now. Anytime you feel like I've got to fight, freeze, or flee, your amygdala is usually in charge. You do not want that in charge. Walk away until you can go calm down. or start doing deep breathing or doing something else. Okay? Am I addressing y'all's issues about stress? Okay. It's an inside job mostly, because the fact is crap is going to happen to you. It happens to all of us. It will happen. It's not what, it's when. I mean, that is the way that it is. That's the reason that I wrote the book the way I did, about people who handle that, who say, okay, I'm going to be a realistic optimist. If any of you have read Joan Borshenko, those are her terms. You want to be realistic, but you also want to be an optimist. It's like, okay, I'm a realist, but I want to have hope. And I think that's so important in medicine. It's like, you've got to be realistic. You can't be pie in the sky, but you also want to give people hope that, you know, do the best you can, fight. But it doesn't mean, it doesn't guarantee that we get a good outcome. It doesn't guarantee it. So there are so many great people who have worked in medicine that it's just, you know, it's innumerable. And so much that they can teach us. And again, I really want to acknowledge you guys for going down this road. I know it's a hard road, but I wouldn't trade being in a helping profession. And at the end of the day, what they found out in the Valiant study of all those men, didn't matter the ones who made all that money or who worked for corporations, or the ones that were most happy had quality relationships and meaning in their life. So I guess the last thing I would say is that, do any of you know who Joseph Campbell was? Okay, Joseph Campbell taught mythology. And he was a mythology teacher for 50 years. And he was interviewed on public television. There was a whole series of interviews called The Power of Myth. And one day, Bill, he was in his 80s and still so vibrant. And one day, Bill Moyers, who was interviewing him, asked him, he said, Dr. Campbell, if you had to say one lesson from world mythology, what would it be? And he said, follow your bliss. Do what's really true to you. That's the message that echoes throughout it. So thank you for doing what you did. And it was an honor to do this.